Madam Chief Justice, Your Honors, and may it please the Court, my name is Michael Johnson, and I, along with my co-counsel Kelly Kearney, represent the petitioner in this matter, the Washington County School District. I will be addressing the second issue, whether Ms. Clark's First Amendment right was violated by Pleasantville High School when it suspended her for her demeaning and violent Facebook post. Your Honors, this case is yet another in this court's line following Tinker versus Des Moines Independent Community School District that permits a school to regulate student speech that disrupts the school, is demeaning to a student, and is in clear violation of a school's policy. Therefore, this court should reverse the 14th Circuit's holding for the following two reasons. Ms. Clark's post resulted in a material disruption and a reasonably foreseeable material disruption. And second, Ms. Clark's post created a clear and substantial nexus to the school. I'd like to begin this argument by addressing my second point, whether Ms. Clark's Facebook post had a requisite nexus to the school. This court has previously restricted student speech in 3 landmark cases. In Hazelwood versus Kumeyer, this court restricted student speech that was proffered and circulated in a student newspaper. In Bethel versus Frazier, this court restricted student speech that was made at a student assembly. And third, this court restricted student speech when it was was made on a banner that was strung across the street off campus from the school.
Yeah, but wasn't that during a parade that was going on at the school?
Yes, Your Honor. However, in that case, the banner was within clear earshot and eyeshot of the campus, and it was off campus. And in this case, it's very similar in the sense that Ms. Clark's post was published and broadcast to Pleasantville High School students, many of whom...
But counsel, I just don't think that there's a sufficient nexus here. I mean, you have turned our attention to these 3 very important landmark cases, but I think in those cases, it was the relationship between the speech and the school was very clear. And here, we don't have speech being made on campus or even across the street from campus. We don't really have any relationship or connection to the school at all, considering that Ms. Clark made this post on a private Facebook wall to a limited audience in the privacy of her own home on a private computer.
Your Honor, this court is faced with an interesting problem and needs to address a problem that school administrators have, and that is how to regulate student social media, which is undoubtedly proffered off campus. In this case, it was made from the comfort of the student's home. However, student speech that is made over the internet can have a substantial disruption on the school activities. And the nexus in this case was created based on the post's content and the audience. Drawing this court's attention to the content of the post, Ms. Clark's post states that Ms. Anderson should watch out at school, naming the school by name. Further,
so, counsel, what if Ms. Clark had posted to an audience that didn't include any Pleasantville High School students, but she posted she posted on her neighborhood Facebook page, which is private and only members of the neighborhood can access it, and there are no Pleasantville students who are in her neighborhood. Say she posted a post on that page, and the post had even more, disturbing language than what we have here, like very specific, even more specific, like at gym class, tomorrow in gym class at 8:30 a.m., I'm going to use a knife and I'm going to shank Ms. Clark. Would that have any sort of connection to the school under your content and audience analysis?
in that case, because the audience did not include any Pleasantville High School students, there could be a valid argument that the school did not have a nexus over that speech. However, that speech would fall under my co-counsel's true threat analysis, which would still allow that speech to be subject to school regulation because it reaches the level of a true threat.
What about the fact that it specifically mentions the school? Is there any sort of nuance? Like, say the audience isn't Pleasantville students, but the post specifically mentions, gym class at 8:30 a.m. at Pleasantville High School. Does the fact that it specifically mentions the school, even if it doesn't mention, a bunch of students, does that establish any sort of nexus?
Yes, and the petitioner in this case argues for a content and an audience analysis and both of those factors can be balanced and weighed. And in your scenario, the content of that post would undoubtedly create a nexus under which the school can decide whether to or to not regulate that student speech under Tinker. Further, the audience of this post, it creates the nexus to Pleasantville High School. While Ms. Clark may want to hide under a veil of her private account, she stated...
Well, we don't exactly know who the audience is, right?
She posted this to her Facebook friend group, and that is the audience, and members of that Facebook group received that post, but that post also trickled out into the Pleasantville High School community at large.
But isn't this extending the line too far? Because if her Facebook community has absolutely no Pleasantville High School students, it just merely references a girl at school, isn't that extending this too far? Because in the 3 seminal cases that you listed, those were all in very clearly ways either on campus or tangentially on campus.
Yes, but drawing back to the content analysis of the post, she mentions the school by name, she mentions a student by name, and she threatens the student to watch out at school.
So the audience doesn't really matter of the Facebook community.
If this court would like to dive in or examine the audience of the post and determine and make the assumption that no Pleasantville High School students were a direct audience of the post, yes. However, Petitioner advocates to look at not only the direct audience, but also the indirect audience, which undoubtedly would be invoked based on this post.
So do we need to find that the content of the post is directed at the school and that the audience was a school audience in order to find in your favor?
Yes. Both the audience and the content analysis must reach a sufficient level that a reasonable person could find a nexus between the school and the student speech.
If we found that, okay, the audience was Pleasantville High School students, but the content doesn't really establish any sort of connection to the school, would you lose?
Could you rephrase that question?
Sure.
That the audience alone was the student body?
Yes. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, say we're convinced that there's a nexus between the speech and the audience, but we're not convinced that there's a nexus between the content of the speech and the school. Do you lose?
In the case of strictly student social media, yes, the petitioner would lose on that argument, because that would be similar to a group of students gathering off campus and discussing non-school matters or discussing a sports outing or something of that nature, and not a specific school activity, a specific student.
Okay.
The content must be, as noted, sufficiently
So you
related
need
to
both,
the school.
I guess. Both need to have a connection to the school.
Yes.
Okay.
They both must be balanced, yes.
Okay.
And by permitting a nexus analysis and adding that to the seminal Tinker case, that allows the sole purpose and the original purpose of Tinker to remain intact. And that's to allow schools to educate students in a safe and inclusive environment. And that brings me to my next
But a
point.
safe and inclusive environment, it doesn't sound like Ms. Clark felt safe and included because she was targeting the school policy.
She may have felt that she was not safe because she was not competing on a basketball team that was exclusively comprised of females. However, she was undoubtedly being included, and she had no reason to feel physically threatened, as noted by anything, or there's no evidence in the record that states that she felt threatened physically. She merely stated that the policy was unfair and immoral, and it may have been unfair because she wasn't as capable of playing basketball on the level that a male is naturally, but that lends nothing to a threatened or feeling of insecurity.
Are you saying that there was no true threat then, but that the school still properly regulated?
This court need not find a true threat in order for student speech to be subject to regulation. And moving back to the Tinker note that I had previously mentioned, a school is permitted to regulate student speech under the Tinker test, and this court must find that only one of the 3 prongs of the Tinker test are satisfied, and those 3 prongs are: 1, a material disruption; 2, a reasonably foreseeable material disruption; and 3, a violation of a student's right to feel secure. Petitioner strongly notes that there was a reasonably foreseeable material disruption. This court noted in Morse that a school is permitted to intervene before violence erupts on campus.
What were the facts of Morse?
In Morse, there was actually there was not a physically threatening student speech made. It was a speech was found on a banner across the street from the school, and the banner read "Bong hits for Jesus." And in that case, the school was permitted to regulate the student speech because advocating the use of illegal drugs was directly at odds with, as previously noted, the sole purpose of schools, and that's to educate students in a safe environment. And the use of illegal drugs is not a healthy nor safe environment to.
So what about this post is directly counterintuitive to the purpose of a school?
In this case, the fact that she told a student to watch out at school and the clear violent undertones, which is in direct violation.
Well, it doesn't sound violent because she said she meant it in jest.
Hindsight is 20/20, and she can elect to say that after the fact. However, as my co-counsel noted, this case can be evaluated, and the contents of the post can be evaluated from a reasonably recipient's point of view, and that draws this court's focus to the third prong of the Tinker analysis, and that is a student speech is subject to regulation when a student is has their right to feel secure violated on campus. And this court has yet to hear a case that necessitated a thorough definition of what it means to have a student's right to feel secure violated. However, the Ninth Circuit in Harper versus Poway recently created a definition for what it means to have a student's right to feel secure violated. And in that case, a student wore a t-shirt that said homosexuality was shameful on a day that the school had created to create and foster inclusion for students of all sexual identities. And that court found...
Like they wore that shirt to school. And here we have a young student who merely went home in her private bedroom and on her private computer. Simply, it sounds like she just vented some frustrations online, and she wasn't even friends with these people. It's not like she showed up and shouted this on school grounds.
Effectively, she did, Your Honor. She did broadcast this to a large community, and the contents of the post trickled out into the Pleasantville High School community. And the Harper court stated that a student's right to feel secure is violated when they are not only physically threatened, but also subject to a psychological attack.
What's the psychological attack here?
Miss Clark's post stated that transgender is another word for freak of nature, and said that this post goes for all the TGs crawling out of the woodwork, comparing transgender students to insects, and also the constant and pervasive use of it in reference to Miss Clark, which is a gender-neutral pronoun. And just as the Harper court noted, those are the types of comments that call and beg a student to question their self-worth and rightful place in society, which Miss Anderson has. And based on the content and the audience of the post, this speech is subject to school regulation. And because this court can clearly find, based on ample evidence in the record, based not only on the contents of the post, but also the reactions and physical reactions of the students, Miss Anderson, Miss Cardona, of note, but also other students who my co-counsel noted addressed Principal Franklin and said that they were concerned about the content of the post.
Yeah, but we already asked your co-counsel that, we don't know what they were complaining about the post. Maybe they were mad that Ms. Clark is getting punished for writing the post. Maybe they're mad about the school policy.
Yes, and those students complaining to Principal Franklin are merely contextual factors that this court must find. However, the stronger evidence lies in the fact that Miss Anderson was visibly upset in the meeting that Principal Franklin held with her and Miss Anderson's parents, along with Miss Cardona. And the connection is obvious and apparent to this court based on that. She need not come forth with an affidavit, nor should she be subject to the embarrassment of presenting herself in front of this court that she has been subject to based on Miss Clark's post.
Counsel, one final question for you. Do you believe that Tinker in its current form is sufficient to handle school the school's regular